to Preserving Your Personal Library. We are all members of the Preservation Lab team, and we're here tonight to talk to you about preservation issues that you might encounter in your home. We'll offer tips and recommendations throughout this live stream, and then we'll end with a fun step-by-step demo on how to make a paper slipcase.
Hi, everyone.
All the topics we cover today will not be discussed in great depth. So we have provided a resource handout with helpful links, and you can find that below. And please feel free to ask any questions you might have throughout the live stream, and we'll try to answer them to our very best ability at the end.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm going to start by introducing the Preservation Lab. So the Preservation Lab is a collaborative book and paper lab between the University of Cincinnati Libraries and the Public Library of Cincinnati and Hamilton County. The Preservation Lab is jointly staffed and funded by both institutions, and we do split our time between both collections, general circulating items that you may take home, and our non-circulating items, such as special collections that you may find at the Cincinnati room at the Public Library. The Preservation Lab staff preserves and conserves these collections through rehousing, preventive conservation, and also in-depth conservation treatments. It is important to point out that the Preservation Lab only provides services to the Public Library of Cincinnati and Hamilton County and to the University of Cincinnati Libraries, and we cannot provide services to private individuals. So I'm going to start by introducing myself. My name is Katarina. I am one of the senior conservation technicians at the Preservation Lab. I'm actually a University of Cincinnati employee, but I do work on collections from both institutions, mainly on special collections. And I've been at the Preservation Lab for about 5 years now.
And I am Jessica Ebert. I am a conservation technician. I am the student supervisor of our wonderful conservation student workers. And I am the photographic documentation specialist in the lab. I'm a University of Cincinnati employee, and I've been in the conservation department for 13 years.
And my name is Casey Jansen. I am a senior conservation technician, that's a mouthful, for the Public Library of Cincinnati and Hamilton County. I am the newest member of the Preservation Lab, and I've been there just almost a year and a half. It feels like longer because I feel so welcome and loved there. We're a great team, and we hope we can provide some really great insight for you today. So I'm going to jump right into things. So while we, the three of us and the rest of the lab, spend our time in the lab caring for both of the library's collections, we also have found great ways to use our knowledge to care for our own personal collections in our homes. You can see some of them behind us. Whether your collections contain priceless historic books, personal photographs, family albums, or just endless amounts of mass market paper and hardcover books, we're hopeful that we can help you care for those items the best way possible. Again, our recommendations are not exhaustive, but we want to give a good jumping off point for how you can care for your personal libraries. To start on a larger scale, I'm going to talk through some tips about the ideal environment for your personal collection to be stored in. Now, the ideal environment for book and paper-based materials is a stable temperature at or under 70 degrees and a stable relative humidity between 30 to 50%. Keeping your collections within this environment will reduce the risk of pests, mold, and deterioration. Now, an important key word in the ideal environment is stable. Here in Ohio, that is very problematic as we have cold and dry winters and hot and humid summers. You want to try to store your collections in areas that don't experience these fast fluctuations. Some of the most common places that people might store their collections are attics, basements, and garages. But these are definitely areas to avoid. They are all likely unstable environments that shift drastically depending on not only the time of day, but also the time of year. So these areas are also problematic as they are often too warm and too damp. Book and paper-based materials do best in a cool and relatively dry environment, so avoiding hot and humid areas is crucial. This also means that it is best to store your collections away from heat sources in your home. When books are stored in a damp environment, it is much more likely that mold will begin to form on your collections. Dampness in the air alone can cause mold to form, but basements, attics, and garages, those problematic areas, are also more prone to leaks or flooding. So keeping your books off of the floor on shelves will help prevent damage if a flood were to occur. Also, keeping them out from under sources of water, such as pipes, is key. If possible, keep your collections out of these problematic areas and instead in the rooms of your home that are better regulated for temperature and humidity. So heat and high humidity are problematic. We covered that, but storing your collections in an environment that is too dry can also cause issues. A great example of books being damaged by a dry environment is when we look at books that utilize parchment. So parchment, often referred to as vellum, is a prepared and dried animal skin, and it is very prone to damage when there are fluctuations in temperature and humidity. So you should be seeing a few photos that show how easily and how parchment can warp in a dry environment. If you have a parchment book in your collections, taking extra precautions to keep that book in a good environment and even in a special enclosure is a really good idea. Parchment is a stark example of how a book can warp, but paper-based materials can see these fluctuations as well. Another problem that can invade your collections in these bad, warm, and damp environments are pests. And Katerina will talk through some of the most common and invasive bug issues that can affect your books.
So as you learned with Casey, the environment can cause some damage to your collection. And if the levels of temperature and humidity are not the appropriate levels or they fluctuate a lot, that could lead to a pest infestation. There is a variety of insect species and other pests such as mice that can pose threats to your collections. So most of the species of insects that we consider harmful to paper collections are not attracted to the major paper component, which is cellulose, but instead they feed on other components of paper, such as coatings and sizings, such as gelatin. Also, there are some species that will feed, for example, on cardboard or protein materials like animal skins and like, for example, your leather bindings. It is also important to keep in mind that it's not only the diet of these animals that can be harmful to your collections, but also, for example, their excrements, their droppings, and also their nesting habits. So what kind of species should we be looking for in your personal library? So as you see, there's two images here. One is of firebrad and the other one is a silverfish. These are paper pests, and these are two different species. However, they do look the same. They look similar, I shouldn't say the same. They look similar, and they're both harmful. So if you see those, either one, they're harmful to your collection. And these feed on paper components. They can create holes on the book pages, but they also can damage your bindings because they are attracted to the adhesive that has been used to create those bindings. There's also general pests such as cockroaches, which can definitely feed on paper, eat the edges of pages. They can also be attracted to different bindings such as leather bindings and the adhesive that was used to create those bindings. Also keep in mind that their excrements can cause some staining. Another pest that we can consider is bedbugs. They don't feed on paper. However, their droppings can cause some serious staining to your books. And finally, mice. It's another type of animal we should look at, just because they could use paper in your books as nesting material and can cause some serious damage. So let's look at some pest damage examples. So I have here this book. I'm gonna try to get it closer to the camera. So I don't know if you can see, but the edges of this book have been colored green. But the problem is, over time, the insects have been eating away that coloration. And also, even on this corner here, they've been eating a little bit of it. So that's one example. So then the image you see on the screen, you can see that a channel has been eaten away through those pages, probably caused by an insect. In this case, it has not affected the information, the text. But let's go on to the next image. And as you can see, this one shows substantial damage. Multiple pages have lost substantial areas, and also the information is lost. So sometimes when insects attack your collections, it may not be damaging to the information, but in most cases, there's a lot of information that is lost. So our last two images, they represent sort of the same thing. So here we see the damage caused by the droppings of insects. On one of the images, you can see some black staining along the edges, and on the other one, you see black staining along the gutter. So this is caused by the excrements of insects. It could be from a variety of species. So what can we do? So first of all, I just want to point out, we are not going to cover the methods that you can use to treat a pest infestation. You could look at our resources page that we provide, and it may have some information there for you. But what I'm going to tell you is a few ideas that you can use at home to prevent a pest infestation. So what are our best solutions? So first of all, you want to have a moderate environment. Like Casey mentioned in the beginning, you want to keep those levels of temperature and humidity as constant as possible, hopefully at the levels she pointed out, but even I in my home cannot maintain those levels. So I try to keep everything at least not fluctuating. So that's a good way to do it. Also, reduce your food sources. So for example, there's a lot of food sources for insects, from food waste, stored food in open containers. Plants and cut flowers are also a source of food. And for example, there's also other insects that may not be harmful to your collections, but they may attract insects that are harmful to your collection. So you do want to keep those in mind. Another thing is avoid water sources. Overwatered plants, sinks, and water pipes, all of these could attract insects. And like Casey mentioned, water pipes and sinks could lead to a water disaster. So overall, try to not have your collection near those. That would be great. Finally, just keep a good housekeeping. Dirt and dust can provide a very friendly environment for your insects, and will also maybe prevent you from seeing when the pest activity is increasing. So vacuum regularly where your collection is may go a long way to help you detect if you have any pests or not. Just to sum up, insects love damp, small, dark, closed areas, undisturbed areas. So if your collection is in sort of an area like this, just maybe think about, okay, maybe put a fan or two just to keep a good air flowing, maybe turn on the light more regularly, and then keep in mind the food sources like cutted flowers, the plants. If you do have those near your collection, that's fine, but just make sure that the area around them is clean so you can still see if there's any pest activity. So now that we covered a few tips that you can implement at home about pests, I'm going to pass it on to Casey. She's going to talk to us about how to preserve our collection while the books sit on a shelf.
So if you are just joining us, we are here from the Preservation Lab talking about preserving your personal library. We've already covered some great topics about your home environment and pests. And like Kat said, next we'll start to cover book storage. So bookshelves are likely one of the most common places that your personal collections are stored. If you're like me, you probably have way too many books to fit on your bookshelves, but they are a great and obvious way to store your library. There are, though, some things to keep in mind when you're doing so. So light damage is a huge issue we see with books that are stored on shelves. Almost all of my bookshelves in my home see direct sunlight, which is the main culprit when it comes to light damage. Although other light sources can also cause light damage and fading to books as well. Light damage can be hard to spot if your books are stored correctly on the shelves, as only the spine will be exposed and not the front and back cover. But to check for fading, you may just want to pull the book off the shelf and compare the color of the spine to the color of the rest of the book. So most of my examples are right here. A lot of them are pink or red, which kind of points to that color being particularly prone to light damage, but all colors can fade when exposed to light. Don't think other colors are safe. I think a really shocking fact is that some of these books up here have been on my shelf for a little over a year. That is how fast this fading can happen. So let's look at a few more examples. We saw that first red one. But we can clearly see the color shift from the spine to the front and back cover. And we can see this happen to different colors of books, like I said. So this is the red example. You can see the spine used to be this color. It's not anymore. We can see a green example. So green, the spine is now basically blue. We also have a black example. The spine is kind of gray now. And this is one of my favorites. It's so bad. This pink example. And again, this book has probably been on my shelf for just a little over a year. Some of these books are obviously older, like this one. You can even kind of see it starts to fade on the front cover. And not just the spine too, where it was probably exposed to the sun on the front cover too. So this is an older one, but the damage is the same regardless of how old the book is. And they will continue to fade as time goes on. So if you catch it early, try to do something about it. So while avoiding sunlight completely is probably not possible in our own homes, it is wise to consider what items in your collection see direct sunlight throughout the day. So most of these books and most of my books, my personal books, are just mass market books. They don't hold a lot of special value to me. But I do have some books that do, that are more special. And I try to keep these books and store these books on shelves that don't experience direct sunlight. Another great step you can do, especially for those special books, but another step you can do to protect them is to house them in an enclosure. And Jessica's later going to talk about some storage options. Katerina will teach us how to make a slipcase, but ultimately an enclosure will protect the book from light damage even when it's on the shelf. So like this is one of my more special books. It's in a box. It can sit on the shelf. The box might get light damage, but the book inside will not. But if enclosures are not an option, you can close your blinds or your curtains, and that can help minimize light exposure. You can even have UV blocking film installed on your windows or UV blocking blinds. This would be more the case if you had really special collections that you were particularly concerned about their light damage. Now, moving on to another shelf issue, we've exhausted light damage. We haven't. That's the sad part. But we're going to move on to oversized books, like coffee table books. These bring up additional issues when they are stored on shelves. Because of their size, they can be difficult to store safely. Most of my bookshelves aren't tall enough to store them like you would a normal book. But there are solutions when this is the case. You can store the book on its side, like this one is here, and just on its side, flat on a shelf. This will allow you to stack a few large books together in a stack. This is example A. If you store this way, just be sure that the book doesn't overhang off the edge of the shelf. Over time, gravity will cause this book to warp if it's not fully supported. So let's take a closer look at this example. I'm going to move these two out of the way and disappear from view. You can see that it's really, it's a big book. We all have these kinds of books though. You can see it doesn't fit on the shelf this way. That's not going to work. So if you put it sideways like it was earlier, that seems like a really good solution. It clearly, seemingly fits this way, but it's actually overhanging by about 1.5 inches. So it's really not a good solution. It will warp over time because of how heavy the book is. Now, another way you can store a large book like this is spine side down. So we all know what the spine of the book is, right? Spine side down like this. It fits on the shelf this way. If you are doing this, just make sure that the book has a flat spine. See, this one has a flat spine. This other one I had stacked on top of it has a rounded spine. You don't want to store a rounded spine side down on a shelf. That won't do good things to this book. So spine side down. If you're going to store your book this way, this vertical way, the main thing we want you to avoid is to never store the book on its foredge. So this is the opposite side of the book from the spine. I'm going to quickly show you what this all kind of looks like up close. So again, this is a book. It has a flat spine. It would technically be fine to store on its spine. Let me get this a little closer. You can see it's all nice and neat. It's jogged up in there. If you had bookends on either side, it would be nice and supported. If we move it to its foredge though, you will kind of start to see this rounded gap form at the spine. And I'll talk about what will happen over time with that. But if you ever see that gap in your books because it's stored this way, that's not good for your books. You want to avoid that, avoid the foredge, stick to the spine if you can. It feels much better in your hand. You should just try it with the book you have. You can feel the difference. Again, spine side down. Seems like a good idea, right? It fits, kind of. But it's overhanging, just like if it was stored on its side. And this just won't be a good solution either. So ultimately, my option for this book is to find a deeper shelf or pick an enclosure of some kind for it to stay in. Or it could live on a coffee table. So if a book is stored on its foredge, which we're telling you to avoid, this will cause a book of any size to warp as the text block will pull away from the binding. Again, you can try it and you can feel that. This is particularly an issue with an oversized book because that text block is so heavy and its attachment to its binding isn't built to sustain that weight over time. So this can cause the text block to just fully break away from the binding. You can have a text block and you can have the cover, and they can be two separate things if that happens. So if you store a book this way, you will see that gap in the spine. Like I said, this is not good. You should see a photo now that clearly, more clearly than I could show you, clearly depicts this gap that can form, and you can see how the text block would gradually fall away from the binding. Another thing, you also want all of your books to be supported, not just oversized books. You want all of your books to be supported and not shelved at weird angles. You can see I have some examples here that were just skewed at an angle right here. We've all done this, right? So using bookends or heavy items to keep your books straight is always a good idea. So this is easy, right? You take the books, let's just move them away from being at an awkward angle. We'll set them in and move the bookend. That's it. It's so much better. It's such a better way to store your books. It's going to prevent them from warping and damaging over time. Lastly, I'm going to briefly talk about some super basic cleaning and dusting of books that are stored on shelves. Most importantly, if you're going to take one thing away, take this away. Most importantly, avoid using any type of cleaning product directly on your items. If you use it to clean your home, you do not want to use it to clean your books. I know that we're all cleaning our homes like crazy right now, but don't use this tactic on your book. Instead, use a clean, dry static cloth like this one, or a soft bristle brush. You do want to make sure your bristles are pretty soft to remove surface dirt and dust from your books. So I'm going to do a really quick demo. If you notice dust on the top of your books, let's say that this is dusty, you'll take it off the shelf and you want to set it on a hard surface like a table. Let's pretend this board is a table. I obviously don't have a table in front of me. So you'll set it on your table and you'll use one of your hands to securely hold it down. Now, I don't have 3 hands, so I'm going to move my hand to secure it here. And use my second hand as a hand. And you're going to just gently brush the dust away. Very gently brush the dust away. The whole time exerting pressure on your book on the table. It's the same with the cloth. Just gently dusting away. This is no force at all. You are just trying to get the surface dirt off. That's it. Nothing serious. But you do want to make sure you have that pressure on your book, because if you don't, as you're wiping your bristles across, there's a fear that the pages could open and the bristle could sneak inside the pages and tear or bend or rip some of the books. So that's why you want to exert that pressure. Put that away. Again, if you have a precious special collection book, storing it in an enclosure is just another really great way to keep it safe from dust that accumulates in your home, so you don't have to worry about stuff like that. So bookshelves are obviously a great way to store your personal collections, but there are always issues to consider when it comes to shelves themselves. And there are other storage methods as well. And Jessica will talk about both of these topics next.
All right, so sometimes your bookshelf itself and what it's made out of can directly impact your books. So specifically, real wood shelving can be really problematic, as wood is naturally acidic and that can transfer to your book over time. So in the library and for the lab, for our institutional libraries that have wooden shelving, what we will do is we'll create a barrier layer in between our wooden shelving and our collection materials. So we'll line the shelves with either archival paper or polyester film, which some people refer to as mylar. And then we'll put bookends at either end just to make sure our books aren't setting right up against the shelving. So if you're in the market for new shelving, what do you want to look out for? So powder-coated metal shelving is really great. It's really the ideal. But even inexpensive Swedish-made shelving or other melamine-coated shelves are actually pretty decent for your books. The only thing you need to keep in mind with inexpensive shelving like that is sometimes it can sag and warp over time, so you want to be careful about not overloading your shelves. All right, so now let's talk about your other personal treasures that maybe aren't stored on the shelf. We're going to specifically talk about the matting and framing of your flat paper-based items, and then we'll also talk about some other storage solutions. So when we talk about matting and framing, there are so many considerations to make, and there's so many options out there, from inexpensive to quite pricey. And just because something looks nicely matted and framed does not mean it's receiving the protection it deserves. And because professional framing is quite costly, it's usually best to first assess the value and significance of your item before you determine what type of frame is best. So I have two examples here that are from my personal collection. This is my professionally framed example. It is an original piece of art, actually the first piece of art I ever purchased as a young adult. It has great sentimental and emotional value to me. I think though when I originally got it framed, it cost more to frame it than it did for the art inside of it. But I don't regret that one bit because it has been in this frame for over 15 years and it's aging beautifully. I can't see any signs of damage, so that was a great decision on my part. Good job, College Jessica. All right, so now let's look at my inexpensive example. So this is a frame that I think I got at a thrift store, a mat that is not archival and I cut myself. But you know what? That's okay. These are just two drugstore prints that probably cost me 10 cents a piece. And it's worth it. You know, it doesn't really need that much. So once you've assessed your, I should say about this, I have backups of these images. I have the original images and I can print them anytime I want. So that's another factor. If you have the original images and you can reprint them, maybe it's not worth it, as long as you have them backed up. So once you've assessed the value and significance of your flat paper-based item, you want to then consider the glass. So for mass market frames like this that you can find in any store, anywhere, this glass is not coated whatsoever to protect from UV radiation. So the damaging stuff that causes all that light damage that Casey was talking about. So when you think about when you're deciding to do professional framing, you want to ask your framer about UV filtering glass or acrylics. All right, so now let's talk about matting. So for mats, if you buy a mat at an art store, a craft store, or even one of those pre-cut ones that comes in the frame, chances are it's not archival, or if it is listed as archival, only the exterior of the mat is archival, but the interior core is probably acidic. And you can see an example, a detailed shot of this inexpensive example that I have where the mat board core is significantly yellowed. And this has only been in this frame for maybe 8 years, so it doesn't take long. And what happens is that acid in that mat board will transfer to your object over time. And you can see another example of that, a really severe example of that in this other image. So in the lab, in order to kind of combat this, we use a type of mat board called Rising Museum board. It's endorsed by the Library of Congress, so it's pretty top notch. And I've included some links in our resource handout where you can find it. All right, so oftentimes too, your type of flat paper-based material will indicate what type of display might be best. So for example, if you have a really valuable, important photograph, not one of those cheap prints, that you want to take to a custom frame or a professional framer to have custom framed, you want to ask for unbuffered mat board. So buffering agents are put into archival products to do wonders for so many things. They actually take out acidity and bad stuff in the environment, and that's great for things like books and so many other materials. But for some photographs and things like blueprints, it can actually cause damage. So let's talk about blueprints for a second. So blueprints are extremely light sensitive, and I would highly recommend not matting and framing them if at all possible. But if you must, please get the best UV filtering glass or acrylic you can. Make sure everything inside that framing package is unbuffered. And you want to make sure that you periodically rotate them off your wall and into some sort of dark storage scenario that will allow them to recharge. All right, so that's enough about on the wall. Let's talk about other storage scenarios you might encounter in your house. So typical things when we talk about storage in our homes are things like cardboard boxes, shoe boxes, and plastic bins. So cardboard boxes and shoe boxes, you know what I'm going to say, they're inherently flawed, they're naturally acidic, they actually attract pests, and they offer little to no protection against water damage. Plastic bins are also problematic sometimes. So have you ever opened a plastic bin and been hit by this overwhelming plastic smell? That is the plastic off-gassing. And for book and paper materials that are basically like sponges, this is not a good idea. So what do you want to look for a plastic bin? You want something with a nice secure lid that's going to help you with preventing against pest damage and possible water damage. You also want to look for a bin that's polypropylene or polycarbonate. Now, I've been in the aisle of the store looking at plastic bins, and you can't tell what they're made out of. So we have added into our resource document a link to a brand that we would recommend called Iris WeatherTight. So these are great. They're polypropylene. They have a nice secure lid. They're stackable. They come in a wide variety of sizes, and they're pretty affordable, and they're pretty accessible. You can find them at stores throughout the city and online. All right, so you've got your bin. You've purchased your brand new, not off-gassing bin. Now you want to think about organizing and packing that bin. And you want to use all the information that Casey shared earlier about packing your shelf. If your items aren't carefully organized in your bin or supported properly, you're going to end up with damage. You're going to end up with broken corners, tears, detached covers, and deformed parts. And that's not what you want. So And again, too, just like Casey said, we want to pay attention to the location where we're storing our bin. Even if it's got a secure lid, you want it to be in a cool, dry place, not a basement or an attic, and keep it away from those pipes because we don't want pests and we don't want to chance a water emergency. So then you're packing your bin. Say you have a bunch of flat paper-based items, things like loose photographs or letters or prints, newspaper clippings. You really want to be careful and not just throw those in your bin with larger, heavier items that could crumple them and tear them. So I would recommend maybe a separate storage, separate plastic bin just for those fragile items, or you can buy archival folders or polyester L sleeves or document boxes. Again, all this is in the resource document. So you've got your plastic bin. You've got everything lined up. The stars are aligned. Everything's perfect. But you open your storage and you find out your personal family treasure is just falling apart. Unfortunately, many book and paper items are made with inherently bad materials, cheap materials, and those materials age poorly over time, no matter how nicely they're kept. So in these cases, you want to use extra caution with them. If you can, you want to digitize them or scan them. If they're really, really valuable to you and they're worth investing in, you can reach out to a private conservator and kind of consult on possible treatment. Now I'm done talking about storage, so I'll turn you over to Katina, who will show you how to make a quick, easy, protective enclosure for your book.
So, as Casey mentioned, a lot of books on the shelf, they suffer from light damage, dust. Even mine that I showed before suffered from insect damage. So you want to create a simple way to protect your book is to create a paper slipcase. And what is a paper slipcase? It's just a large piece of paper folded around your book to protect it at almost all sides. In this case, if you were concerned about light damage on the spine, you could just flip the book around and have the foredge exposed, and you can even put a title here. That way everything is protected. So this could be used for books with loose boards, with a fragile spine that you want to protect, or even just a book with a loose text block and you want to keep everything together. So to start by making your paper slipcase, the first thing you want to do is you want to have a large sheet of paper that is 3 times the height of your book and 4 times the width of your book. And then once you have that paper, you are ready to start following the instructions from the video we're going to show now. Hi, today I'm going to show you how to make a paper slipcase just like this one. And this is just a piece of paper that has been folded and created a paper slipcase for this specific book. I'm going to show you how to make one for this smaller book. And the first step is to start with a big sheet of paper, and you use your book to cut the right dimensions for the paper. So first, we're going to decide the length of the paper, and that will be the width of the spine, 1 width of the spine, and 3 times the width of the book. So 1, 2, 3. Doesn't need to be the most accurate measurements. We'll fold everything at the end and it will work. So I'm going to use this little tick mark that I did, create a little crease there, and then I'm going to fold it. I do want to make sure that these 2 lines of the paper are flush, so I know that my crease is square. And then I'll just use my fingers and I'll just crease it really well. And you can use scissors to cut this, or you can cut it with your hands like I'm going to demonstrate right now. So I crease it really well with my fingers, and now I'm able to cut. Now for the height of the paper, it's going to be 2 times the height of your book. So 1, 2. And again, I'm not being very precise because we will fold everything to fit the book. So if it's a little bit off, it's not a big deal. So I made a little tick mark, and I'll use this as my guide to make the crease. Again, I do want to make sure that these edges of the paper align, so I know the fold, it is square. Again, I'll trim it using my fingers, but you can use scissors or an X-Acto knife, whatever tool you would like to use. And there you go. Now I have my perfect paper cut to the size that I need to make a paper slipcase for this book. So the first step is to make the height lines. This is just a template, and you can see the height lines right here. These two are the height lines. This is what you want to use. Those are the first lines you want to start. So you center your book on the paper, and using the edge of the boards, you can just crease them, or you can make a small line. I'll crease them both anyway. And you'll use those creases as your guides to fold for the height lines. So again, I do want to make sure that these edges of the paper are flush together, so I know this is square. And I'll do that on the other side. And if these two papers overlap, these two edges overlap, it's not a big deal. It won't affect anything. All right. So we have our height lines, but now we're going to create the spine lines, which is these two lines right here in the middle, right here. For that, again, you're going to use your book, and you're going to center it on the paper. You want to make sure you have enough, the same amount on either side, and you can use a pencil to do little tick marks, or you can crease it. So then what I'll use is I'll use the tick marks that I did, the pencil marks. And I do want to make sure that I don't fold like this, that these two edges are flush together, so everything is square. And then I'll do it for the other side. And these are aligning. And I'll crease it again with using your nail is actually a really good tool because it makes really sharp creases. And there you go. Now you have your spine lines. Now the next step is to make the diagonal lines right here. For that, I'm gonna have to use my book, and I'll hold the book in place. And using the spine lines, I want them to be aligned with the edges of the boards of the book, these edges here. And then these lines here should come and be flush with the edges of the boards. So there you go. And the same thing for this side. I'll just push it down and make sure that these align, and then I'll make a crease. I'll just crease it on the inside. And there you go. We have our two first diagonal lines. The same thing on the other side. So I want to make sure that this line here is flush with that one, with the edge of the book. And then the same thing goes for this line. Just make sure you hold this area in place, that way then you can create the line. All right, so now we have the diagonal lines. Then the final step is to create the wall line, okay, which then will fold in. So for that, we're gonna put the book in. Actually, we're gonna put it this way. And I'm gonna see where the edge of the boards are. So they're right there. So I'm gonna fold the paper towards the outside at the edge of the board. Make a make a straight crease. And then actually using that same crease, I'll fold it towards the inside.
And as you can see here, I put everything in place. I have my first wall crease, and I'll do the same thing on the other side. Just flip the book because it's easier with the edge of the board. And again, you can do it different ways. You can make a little tick mark here, or you can just flip the book and just fold it towards the outside and then towards the inside once you have the crease. Take the book out. And then putting the book in, and I can see, there you go. Now you have created your own paper slipcase for your book. Again, I'm leaving the foredge exposed, so I could put a title here. I want to put the book on the shelf like that, or I can just flip the book, have the spine exposed, and just put it like this on the shelf. Thank you very much.
So if you want to try the own paper slipcase at home, you can find this video complete with instructions and supply lists on our Media Space channel. We have a direct link in the resource document. Now I'll see if we have any questions. I believe we have one question so far. It's not too late to ask a question. So right now we have a question from Ted. He asked, where's a good place to buy big, beautiful sheets of paper? I would say my favorite place to buy paper is Dolphin Paper, which is actually a little bit south of Indianapolis. So you can actually drive there, and they have a little store, but you can also purchase it online. Anybody else have any ideas?
I could just mention French paper, which you can buy online. They have, depending on what kind of paper you're looking for, like archival or for just making your own paper slip case. They have some really cool designs as well, so you may want to look there.
Yeah. All right, so I don't think we have any other questions, though I'll give a special shout out to a couple people. Michelle, thank you for joining us. Stefan, we love seeing you. Ruby, thanks for joining us from Argentina. That's super cool. Kathleen, Allie, Antoine, Michelle, all of you, thank you so much for joining us. I'll let Casey take it away.
Yeah, so I'm just going to wrap up. We just want to thank you all for watching. This was a tiny bit of our knowledge, and we just really wanted to share something that would be really tangible to everybody as they're spending more time at home right now. So we hope it's helpful. Like Jessica said, that resource guide is going to be super helpful if you want to dig in a little deeper. Hopefully this has also introduced us as the lab to some people. So if you want to learn more, we have a blog, we have an Instagram. If you're not already following the public library on Instagram or the university library Instagram, you should. We're just everything library we love, and we're just so happy to share it with you. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you've all had a good evening.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.